And hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. So today I am joined by Bob Chipman, also known as Moviebob on the internets, also known as the Game Over Thinker on the YouTubes, and now on the Escapist.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
So we'll just start with the introduction of you, if you don't
Uh,
mind.
oh yeah, sure. My name's Bob Chipman. I'm a Boston area film critic, video game content producer, independent filmmaker, freelance film and entertainment journalist, writer, uh, columnist, traveler, bon vivant, video host. If there's something I can be paid to do in this industry, I do it, basically.
Okay. And how did you first discover video games?
Video games already existed by the time I showed up in the world, so I don't know that I discovered them so much as they were just sort of in the ether around me. I think earliest memory was probably, I think coming downstairs at night when I was only the only child for about 3 years, but I was up and crawling, walking around pretty early, and I can remember coming downstairs at night, to bug my parents when I didn't want to sleep, and sometimes they would have my aunt and uncle over, and to hang out and do grown up stuff, which at the time would at times involve breaking out the Atari 2600, which was I don't think people necessarily realize that at for a time, the early game consoles, home computing in general was largely thought of as and like an expensive adult toy, basically. Because it was electronic and complicated and sort of difficult to set up and plugged into a TV. That's why they sold them, black with wood paneling, and there were grown-ups only games and whatnot, but or supposedly grown-ups only games. And you know, my father and his brother would play the Atari baseball and hockey and whatnot. And I would come down and say, it's like, oh, hey, it's video game on TV. So it wasn't like a mysterious or esoteric thing to me that existed. And then there were video arcades in my life. Chuck E. Cheese was already a thing. TV shows where video games were mentioned were already a thing. I don't think I ever saw, like, I know a lot of people in my generation mentioned that they saw Starcade growing up. I didn't. I remember like Nick Arcade later, mentions video game. I remember Mr. Rogers playing Donkey Kong. I remember that. I remember ads on TV for like cartoons. I remember Saturday Supercade. I think I actually saw that before I ever played Frogger or Cubert. But and there was an outdoor arcade type place called Salem Willows in Massachusetts near me, and we would go there, play some games. Chuck E. Cheese was a place. There's the Fun Spot in New Hampshire. That would be that was like the games education. They were just around. You'd go into like a pizza place or a family restaurant. There would be like an arcade machine there to just suck up the quarters, or just things in the ether. But that was my first experience, my earliest, yeah.
Okay. And what would you say is your favorite game/games growing up?
Ooh, my favorites growing up when I was very young. As I was more or less limited to what I was, to what was presented to me. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich. So I pretty much, got into what was around me. So the first thing that I ever really played like a lot of was pretty much everything on the 2600, because that's what we had. And what we got on there was oh god, I'm trying to remember what they played. Like we played the Atari Pac-Man game, which really was a truly awful port of Pac-Man. Like it was really bad, and that wasn't that great. Like their port of Space Invaders was not great. Uh, I got a lot of mileage out of Keystone Cops. Very good. When I went to arcades, I always had to play the hell out of Arcade Space Invaders. Uh, loved to play Double Dragon. Loved to play Kung Fu Master in arcades, which you know was the arcade game based on Wheels on Meals, the Jackie Chan movie. So by the time I had my NES experience, which was Nintendo Entertainment System hits the US 85, 86. So I'm like 5 or 6 years old. I'm in kindergarten, saw that over a friend's house, saw Super Mario Brothers the first time, just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, the sky is blue and they look like cartoons. There's different terrain, dragon at the end, breathing fire at you, saving just blowing my mind, man. And, didn't get one for like, a year after that. But saw it all the time around, and just loved Mario then, loved it ever since. Thought it was just amazing stuff. So obviously loved Super Mario Brothers 2 even more. Loved Mario 3 even more than that. But that was the point when you could go to arcades then and have like the early 16-bit, early late 8-bit games. So to this day, if I go into an arcade and there's any way to play Rastan, gotta play Rastan. Which doesn't even play that well, but like just the atmosphere of it. I don't know. Do people even remember Rastan anymore?
I personally do not know what that is.
You don't know Rastan. Rastan. Look it up on the YouTube. I have a feeling you've seen it if you don't necessarily know as well. Rastan was a ripoff of Conan, basically. Rastan was okay. Graphics are exactly good enough to do like an unlicensed. Oh, I guess Conan's public domain. You don't have to do like a license for it. But it was Rastan was, and it came out on Sega as like Rastan's Saga. But Rastan was like a barbarian swordplay side scroller thing that just had good music basically, and it was this muscly dude with big broadsword, and you just ran sideways and you at the lizard men and the demons and dragons and shit, and just sliced guys and you stabbed, and it had this kind of big sort of soaring epic-ish sounding for bits and bops score running in the background, and just it had the look of that Frank Frazetta high fantasy look to it. And at a point when every other arcade game still largely looked pixels and cartoons and whatnot, it just kind of looked like, oh man, this is some He-Man, Conan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Beastmaster stuff, and that and Altered Beast, which again, very like Altered Beast. If you've played Altered Beast for 5 minutes, you've played all 30 minutes of Altered Beast. It's just one damn thing after another. But it's like, oh my God, I can see the guy's bones, and there's blood and guts and voices, and the dude turns into a werewolf. What the hell is going on here? And it was, like every little tiny visual or gameplay innovation back then was mind blowing, man. So it was just, portals to other worlds. Ninja Gaiden I was obsessed with. Even though Ninja Gaiden is unplayably broken on NES, didn't care. Because, you had them cutscenes, and he was a ninja, which was just the most badass and mysterious thing back then. There's almost no good ninja movies. There's almost like every ninja thing was like shit. But it didn't matter because like conceptually, like what was cooler than a ninja? I don't even know. I don't even know what a ninja is. A ninja's like special forces, but also karate. So what's better? I can't even. I don't even know. Ninjas were like SEAL Team 6, but they had swords. Like what's better? I don't know. You tell me.
Okay. And what would you say is your favorite game and/or games now?
Game games right now. Well, now I'll be honest. Now you mean like games like things that I'm still playing? Because I will confess that more and more I am that old guy who buys more and more like collections of old games and reissues and retro stuff because it's just where my head lives. Like especially because gaming went through a whole bunch of really rapid like leap forward evolutions. in terms of like what the culture of it is and around it, while I was like, busy like working and in college and stuff in like the early 2000s and whatnot, whereby there's like a whole other language, like the whole esports thing, like competitive online multiplayer thing, all of that, everything about like card battlers and stacking and whatnot, everything that's grown out of that point when for a while it seems like everyone was playing some variation on EverQuest or World of Warcraft. No idea. It's a foreign language to me. I don't know how it works. Like I have attempted, because I like the aesthetic and I like the idea and appreciate the community of it, to play Fortnite, Minecraft, and Overwatch. I sort of understand how Overwatch works. The others, I might as well be trying to cast dark magic spells. I have no idea what's going on. Absolutely no idea. No clue. Like I can watch other people do it, and I appreciate that they're like, I have nothing against them. I have younger cousins and family relatives, and my friends and extended relatives have children of their own at this point who have explained this stuff to me, and I admire and think it's wonderful, like what this brings to them. Like I can see in the expressions and the way that they speak about their Fortnite skins and the way that they do it in their Minecraft. Like I see the excitement that I had about the stuff that I loved in video games at that age. So I have no grudge against this stuff or anything like that. I literally, when I say I don't understand it, I mean that in the absolute literal sense. It makes zero sense to me, but I bear it no ill will. I hope to get it at some point. So do you mean, to flip back around on my ramble? So do you mean like current stuff that that I'm into, or like what am I doing right now? Because like right now I'm pretty much playing again stuff that I enjoyed but didn't get to play enough back in like 1980 and 1995. But there is also new stuff that I do appreciate.
Yeah, I was just mainly like, what games are you playing, like, in the present?
In the present, I have been dipping back through, because there's all these, especially on the Switch now, there's these new collections that have been out. I haven't downloaded them yet, but I am definitely going to pick up that the collection of all the Contra games, because the new Contra is coming out, and I'm going to get that as well, because I heard good things. And the Contra games, there is very good, just pure fun gameplay in that. I got the which, by the way, everyone should get this, the gold standard for like retro game collections now. Especially, what I like to do is I like to get the retro game collections of stuff that is mostly stuff I've never effing heard of, because it's basically like getting a Humble Bundle. Because you're getting stuff that you've never heard of this, you've never played it. Yeah, a lot of it might not be good, or it might not hold, but like you're gonna get like an actual like rundown education of stuff, and you're gonna see like the larval bones of gaming. The gold standard of this now, as far as I'm concerned, is the SNK Legacy Collection, which was it's downloadable on several different platforms. They did a physical release on I believe PS4 and Switch. And this is SNK before all SNK made was really good fighters. SNK mainly known now for just being the other, slightly weirder, slightly more, technical button programmy Capcom, right? And this was SNK back in the day when they were making, just weird ultra arcade stuff. This is pre-Metal. This is the stuff that turned into Metal Slug and Fatal Fury and all that. And it's got like Athena and Heavy Barrel and the Ikari Warriors games. And some of them are like almost unplayable now, because this was when, this was a Japanese company that was mainly targeting a U.S. audience. and they were just having to make up not just what the games were about, but like what the rules and form of entire genres were. Like not just, like we're talking as far back as when when Miyamoto sat down to figure out Zelda, and not just figuring out, okay, like how do you describe making a Zelda game in an era when there had never been a Zelda game before? Like, what language do you even use to communicate things like the boomerang and the dungeons and the overworld and the underworld in a universe where that hadn't existed yet? And these are these are the first twin stick shooter games. How do you describe a twin stick shooter when there hadn't been a twin stick shooter before? And they're all in here with the Heavy Barrel and Ikari Warriors. And not only that, in this, they've got the Japanese and American version of all the games that they could, and you can toggle back and forth between them in real time.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the different art styles for them. You can play if there was an existing version of it, the arcade version, NES version, Sega version, whatever. You can see the different release styles, the arcade art, and what is possibly the most interesting version of, you can push basically a play version of it and play a pre-recorded perfect playthrough of the game, where they recorded like an expert, like a speed run of the game going, if you just want to see what this looked like all the way through. But at any time, you can push the button again, and it will immediately click into you at a point in the game, at that same point, and you've got control again.
Huh.
And play from there, and toggle on and off between that. And this is included for even games where there were complete graphic overhauls in between the two. Like, for example, do you remember, I don't know if we're close in age, but way back in the day, there was a fairly well-recalled sort of riff on the Ikari Warriors format game called Guerrilla for the NES. And it was in arcades as well. And it was, a top-down military twin-stick shooter where you were in a tropical environment. You had to save rebels and overthrow a government, right?
Yep.
It's a military game.
I have not played it, but I have heard of it.
Right. So the notorious thing about this game was that it was just you are a guerrilla fighter with a beard and a beret on an island somewhere, and that's it. It's the early 80s. It's sort of generic-ish, whatever. In Japan, this game is explicitly set during the Cuban Revolution and is called Guevara, and you're playing as Che Guevara, and the second player is Fidel Castro, young Fidel Castro. Huh. And, yeah, so obviously this was never going to get released like that in the United States, right? So, this was infamous at the time that they made this game. It was very well received, and then brought the prototype to the American investors, and they said, "The hell are you thinking?" And it was quite a thing. And meanwhile, when they said, "What do you mean? We just read we don't really study the history of Cuba in Japan. This is not really a thing that this is pre-internet." So it's like, this isn't really like a thing that matters in Japan. What's the big deal? As far as we just know, this was an island with a revolution. And it's like, yeah, this is over here in the U.S. We've got this Cold War. We're kind of at war. We're kind of like in a state of conflict with this. So we can't release this game. So they had to rewrite it as this other thing. And of course, if you look at it even now, today, it would be unmistakable what this was about. But it's like the video game version of Rambo 3, where Rambo 3 is a modestly entertaining movie where you just kind of have to ignore the fact that it's like, yeah, these guys, Rambo is fighting and training in this movie. 5 years later they become the Taliban. Oops.
Huh.
Yeah. So I'm playing that, and that's that took a lot of my time. But newer games that have been there, obviously playing Smash Brothers. Just I like the little the cool challenges with the stuff shaken up together. I think yes, would it have been cool to have like the actual things that they're representing instead of the hey, you're gonna fight a giant Rob and a soldier me, and that means Metal Gear. But I kind of like the sort of like action figurine-ness of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a weird vibe to it. And like I just like the existence of Smash Brothers just for the fact that there's now just this thing that exists and sits on the most recent Nintendo console, and every once in a while, randomly, oh yeah, by the way, here's Sans costume for the little guy, and the guy from Fatal Fury will now be in here to show up. Just randomly, yeah, sure, we got this to show up. And there's a little movie, and it's just, wacky fan service the game. Why not? It's just a thing that can happen. And in this world, and I have fun with it. It's entertaining. I'm anxiously waiting to pick up my copy of Link's Awakening. And with the amount of time, i.e., none, that I have to actually play like in-depth, games that take a while to do stuff, I expect that to eat up like all of my time.
Mm-hmm.
Like conceivably with the hour or so, maybe once every couple of days that I have to play play a video game, I can see that lasting me a year. Like at this point, I've had to look at stuff that otherwise I would be like jazzed up to play, and I look at Cyberpunk, and I look at like, man, I really want to do that. I want to try that. And just looking at my life right now, I have had to resign myself to the fact that if I want to see how that looks, I'm gonna have to just watch someone play it on like YouTube or something, because I just do not have the time. I have too many creative projects happening on this side to have that go on, which is it's unfortunate, but it's this is being a grown up. I've got responsibilities.
Okay. And if you were able to, what character would you give their own game?
So this is characters who are like support characters in other games that should have their own like their own dedicated game where they are the protagonist.
Generally, yes.
Yeah. And this would be someone who is not who has not had a game of their own before.
Yes.
Perennial answer is Toad. I think it's weird, although I guess Captain Toad is now the is now sort of the Toad spinoff, right?
I think so. Yes.
So I guess because he's not the Toad, but he's a Toad. So yeah, okay, all right. Wow, all right. Because there's so many that you could grab it. Like, are they? Because the trick is, I really love. I'm one of the person that actually really likes Super Princess Peach. I think there's problems to it, but I thought it was a lot of fun. See, I want to think really hard about this because I saw the preview, but they seem. I mean, they did Wario his own game. That was cool. Thinking on. You know what might be fun is there has not been I don't remember what it was called, but I feel like at a certain point there was, this might not have ever actually been released, but there was like a prototype once upon a time of a PC game where you were like a ghost and you were haunting a house was the idea. Like you were supposed to like scare like not like hurt people, but like like scare people. Like it was like a booby trap setting game, but like you were supposed to like jump out and scare people.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was like a strategy thing, but the strategy was, can you scare people away in increasingly elaborate ways? And I bet you could actually make that work now in like a 3D moving around a selectable way, and you could probably build that around the booze in a very marketable way because people really seem to like the booze.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I could like as a Luigi's Mansion spin-off of a spin-off kind of thing. Like I could see or some other ghost game with popular ghosts, but I think like other than the ghosts from Pac-Man, and I don't know how much cachet they have at this point, I feel like the boos are probably like the most popular video game ghosts
Mm-hmm.
in a certain sense. So like that, I could go for that. Uh, yeah. So something. Yeah. So that would be an answer for that. Uh, I wish honestly, and I know that this qualifies as something that already happened. I really wish that Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero hadn't sucked
Mm-hmm.
because I really do think that there is the germ of a good idea there. One of the things I think that they get wrong all the time when they do the game character spin-off thing is they make it the same game that they're spinning off from, and I don't understand why they do that because it's like, okay, I the reason to do this would be to take this thing that we already know that we like that this character and put it into like a game where you have like the engine or something that you're not totally sure about and use the popularity of that to make it a hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that to my way of thinking, like in movie wise, that's what I'm that's what you would do. So for games, I don't know why they don't do that. Like when I heard Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero when they were first pitching it, I thought, oh man, that's a great idea because we haven't had a decent like ninja side scroller in a while. So how cool would this be? We'll have a good ninja game with maybe some ice mechanic to it. And it's starring Sub-Zero, so people will, give it a look because there's Sub-Zero. And instead, it's just a side scroller using Mortal Kombat mechanics, which is a horrible idea. And so it's like a weak Mortal Kombat game instead of making a decent spin-off game starring Sub-Zero. And like I don't know why you would do that. They could have made a perfectly good like Ninja Gaiden clone, and Ninja Gaiden didn't even exist anymore at that point. And really like sold it up with Sub-Zero as a character, and you could have had a whole run of games based on that because there's so many different guys in Mortal Kombat. You've got soldiers. You could have made army games. You've got karate guys. You could have made like Double Dragon type games. Like the Street Fighter expansive universe has like a wrestling series adjacent to it in Saturday Night Slam Masters. It has the Final Fight series is technically part of Street Fighter universe. That comes in that has a whole different run of stuff. There's a lot you can do there, and it's unfortunate. I think that you could get that going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Let me know if I'm gambling, by the way. If you don't check me, I will just run my damn mouth and say all kinds of nonsense.
that's fine. So, if I had the power and influence at Nintendo, and she already had like half a game of her own, mine would be Toadette.
Okay, yeah. I think Toadette definitely needs. Toadette should definitely get a little more attention on that front because she has a fan base. For a character who sort of popped into existence basically for the party games and for the cart games, she is a great design and a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, way back in the day, in your early times of YouTubery, and you've brought it back when you had your own YouTube channel, and now back with the Escapist 2.0, you created the Game Over Thinker. So, what was like way back in the day? What made you want to create it?
I was bored. Like
Okay.
the original impetus for Game Overthinker was I was working at that point in a Best Buy, and this was way back. This was 2005 2006, and the GameCube era was winding down. I had fallen lightly out of like, hardcore gamer culture stuff. And I was, got reassigned to the video games and DVD department, which was good. And, got a little more connected back into where the culture was at. And there was all of this stuff bubbling up. The Wii was coming back out, and that the explosion of gamer culture back into the mainstream with the Wii happened. This was when Screw Attack was in its ascent at the time. Jim Rolfe, the AVGN, was really making his big impact. The early days of Channel Awesome were a couple years off back before all of the unfortunateness happened there. And so this internet video thing was happening. I'd had a couple YouTube things put up, just joke trailers and comedy stuff, because I had been, previous to this, been working through doing some independent filmmaking stuff. We had some minor success, and it hadn't really gone where I wanted it to. I think if YouTube and digital distribution had been where it was now, or where it was even 10 years ago, 20 years ago when we were putting the stuff together, it would have been a different story. And we're still trying, me and my friends, my immediate family, my brother and such, we're still trying to get this stuff put together. I had all of this equipment and all of this, gear, and I had studied filmmaking, studied media. It's what my degree is in and stuff. And we really got it together. And I thought, I could put together some funny gaming vids, and I did. And right around this same time, I changed over to another retail store for paycheck reasons, and there was in rapid succession, there was the Screw Attack contest to see get a new person on the channel, which I ended up winning. And right around the same time for that, and I had put randomly a couple movie reviews up on the channel, and also got a call from The Escapist, from a video producer named Russ Pitts, who was working there at the time. And said, "Hey, we're looking for a film critic. Would you like to come do that?" And so, I kind of went from being sort of listlessly employed person on the outer edges of the creative side of filmmaking and gaming to the very much inside of the critical end of film and gaming. And that's where I ended up. And that's what I've been doing. And that was pretty much it. I was just kind of bored and wasn't really going where I wanted to on the working on the inside. So I did some culture writing on the outside, and that's where it got.
Okay. And from way back then to the present day, like, how would you describe how different Game Overthinker from back in the early days is to now?
Well, the market changed several times while I was doing it, and so did the availability of technology and the availability of resources and the influences and the stuff going on in games culture itself. So early on, a lot of Game Overthinker stuff was the earliest Game Overthinker stuff was very much me being. There's a lot of it that I think holds up and a lot of it that I think doesn't. A lot of it early on was fairly pretentious and me talking out of my ass and, being very earnest and sincere about it, but also being, like, oh, wow, I'm the first person to ever have these deep thoughts, and these are things that have been sitting in my head since high school about video games. Here's a thought about Mario I'm sure no one's ever had. And as it went on, and as I grew up and also saw other people talking about things and talked to other people about games, and this is also when you had a lot of, Kotaku is launching around then, Polygon is happening, the Escapist itself, Zero Punctuation launches. Um, I'm really trying to remember a lot of like people who also started out around the same time as me who haven't disgraced themselves in the meantime, and it's not that long of a list. But good. There were a lot of good, strong. The new games journalism was happening at the time where people were saying, okay, there's more to write about here than lists of your favorite Double Dragon enemies and rankings of the biggest boobs in Mortal Kombat and your favorite games of all time. And there was interesting stuff happening. And so I thought, okay, all right, I can also get into covering that. And at the same time, you had people like Linkara, Lewis Lovell, nice guy, really nice guy, and Lindsay Ellis, wonderful person, doing the big elaborate showpiece sketch stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And very cool. And I thought, I'm also, doing independent film stuff. I had met a few of these people at MagFest and Penny Arcade Expo, and I had gone down when The Escapist twice in a row held its special convention. Knew Jim Sterling, very good guy, and had gotten the stuff put together. And I thought, hey, I'll get my own guys together, and we'll put on add some goofy sketch stuff to Game Overthinker, and that was fun for a while to put into that. And I also gave a creative outlet on that that was different from the more regimented weekly stuff I was doing at The Escapist, which was not that there was like, they were telling me, you will do the show like this, but that stuff had to come out, every week on a deadline, and for that deadline had to come out in a format, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't like take a week and say, this is going to be late because I need to shoot a fight scene. Whereas with Game Overthinker, it was my thing only, and I had to go, yeah, let's make this let's do this big elaborate thing, and it became this big elaborate thing, and the sketch stuff became like the focus of it. Not everyone loved it. I had a lot of fun doing it, and that's where it was.
Okay. And what would you say is your favorite episode of Game Overthinker, like either past or presently?
It's kind of got like the two separate answers. I think the one that probably holds up the best from the story version set ones is like the psychology of Nintendo fans. I think it's a little on the earnest side, but I think it kind of gets to something real. The advice for gamers one, I think, is generally still pretty good advice. It's a little on the preachy side. There's some, health advice in there that I should have taken myself when I was dealing with some depression issues back in the day, but a little ways after that. But these things happen, and in terms of the sketch stuff, I don't know that there's any one episode that I put that is put together that I think that other than like the War of the Thinkers, which was the only one that was all sketch all the way through, but that I think is all there. But like in terms of the individual beats, I really enjoyed doing the there was a 2-part bit that was a spoof of the Dragon Ball Z, the first, the Trunks arrival arc that was, I mean, like goofing on Dragon Ball Z is one of those things that it's kind of always a win because Dragon Ball is, it's fun to make fun of, but it's also just kind of fun just to do. Like it's just got that aesthetic, and I got to wear a Trunks wig and swing a sword around and recreate the, chopping up Frieza gag. We did a mailbag episode where me and my brother got to recreate. This was the fight between the Overthinker, Pyrothinker, and Cryothinker at the same time, and we got to recreate basically a Godfrey Ho ninja fight scene, which is And again, I don't know if we're the same age, but is sort of an obsession of 80s movie nerd kids of the I don't know if you've seen these. Godfrey Ho made a bunch of ninja movies in the Philippines in the 1980s that were sort of like all made out of pieces of different footage that he shot at different times. And these are the ninja movies where the ninjas are always disappearing and reappearing out of colored smoke, and they wear like camo ninja costumes and blue ninja versus red ninja, and they have like the big gold swords, and it's completely crazy. And we got to do a riff on that with the red and blue costume ninjas, and the explosive sound effects, and I'm really proud of how that came out. And the final episode, which had where we used every costume that we had and every prop and all of the just crazy special effects nonsense, and using green screen and editing to turn two guys into 3 or 4 guys versus an army of dozens of guys in a big old fight scene with video game sound effects and a giant gorilla, and a whole scene set in heaven and hell, and ghosts and Captain N business, and it was just a ton of goofy fun to do, and the kind of stuff that when I was coming up, being a kid, getting into loving cheesy B movies and Godzilla and Ultraman and all that stuff as a kid, was the stuff that I thought I want to grow up and do this for a job. And that was finding a way to finally actually do that was I know not everyone loved that version of the show, and it took a lot of work for not necessarily a huge amount of payoff, but at that time it was so much fun to do, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. I really wouldn't.
Okay. My favorite episode will probably always be like the Why You Love Video Games episode, just because.
Oh, I like that one as well. That is a really good one. Inspired by film critic Hulk, by the way. He's a great writer and film critic who did the Why Do You Love Movies piece.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't mean to cut you off, though. I'm sorry.
It's fine. So, in the ancient year of 2013, you released a little book called Super Mario Bros. 3 Brick by Brick, which, as you stated back then, wanted to be the video game equivalent of a particular film critic dedicating a book's worth of pages to analyzing a singular film. In this case, you analyzed Super Mario Bros. 3 for the NES.
Yep.
So, what made you want to write it?
I had the idea, and I said, no one's doing this. I should do this. I should take a shot at this. This was I hadn't written a book yet, and I thought, let me take a shot at this. I just kind of put the idea out into the ether and said, hey, if I did this, would someone want this? And Fangamer contacted me, and they said, yeah, if you write it, we'll be interested in publishing this. And I was like, well, all right, I'll take a shot at this. And it turned into a project, and it turned out to be a very beneficial thing, going through a difficult time in life psychologically to work on. And it was, I don't think it was a perfect realization of what it was set out to be. But I didn't see anyone else attempting this kind of game analysis. Maybe there's a reason for that, but I'm proud of getting it done. And a lot of people have said that they really enjoyed it, thought it was an interesting experiment, and I liked doing it. And that was the inspiration, was to do a different sort of game criticism book.
Okay. And so, as someone who for the present time, hasn't written any sort of book of any type. Like, how long from start to finish did it take for you to write it?
It took about a year, and I don't know that the timing on that is like fully comparable to the amount of like actual time because I was also playing through the game at a pretty deliberate pace in order to do so, and was also working, a full time day job and a the film criticism and game video production job at the same time. So it was very much kind of like a written when I had the time sort of thing because it's not a particularly long tome.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what sort of advice would you give to anyone out in the world who would think to try and write a book about a game in like a similar format?
I would say know the subject really, really well before you go in. Like make like I settled on that one because it was my favorite game. Something I had a lot to say about, something that had a lot of meaning to me, and also one that I knew that I could conceivably write a lot about without doing the whole playthrough. And then the playthrough was like the meat of it to get in there. Uh, but yeah, it should be like don't write it to answer your own questions about the game. Write it about something that you've got an instruction to give about, not the other way around.
Okay. And unless they're super top secret at the moment, what other video game related projects do you have like on the horizons?
Well, a couple of them are a bit on the secret side. There's a few things I am working toward, a few things that are video game related. I can't give details on them because that's part of the secret. Obviously, the Game Overthinker had a season run of a rebooted version on the Escapist, which did decently, but for just timing and production time's sake, that's going to return to independent status on my own channel in the near future. My own YouTube channel, as people know, has been a little on the slow update side for pretty much this past year because the unexpectedly got the chance to restart things over on the Escapist, and so a couple things had to get backburnered, like the release of Really That Good Star Wars and regular updates to In Bob We Trust and Game Overthinker. That's going to be changing in the very near future in terms of stuff being re-updated because a few business side things that have been taking a business side timeline kind of speed to get taken care of have just recently gotten put out of the way, stamped, signed, notarized, put down in the right way. And, you're going to start seeing a little bit more of that. So I'll be putting up new Game Overthinker content near future, putting up some new looks at classic stuff, if that can be kind of cryptic. I'm very much hoping to put together something resembling a kind of a feature or short film content, which will be video game related in the near future. That's being looked at the screenplay and possibly self-produced format. And if so, one of the projects being looked at for that is video game related. And be on the lookout for merchandising, looking towards merchandising. And if so, Game Overthinker theme merchandising will be very much right at the top of that. So stay tuned because I have not done yet any kind of T-shirt or hat type stuff, and we're finally looking toward getting in on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we move on to the final question, which everyone who's ever been on the show has never had any confusion with ever. Moviebob, in your opinion, is video games?
Is video games? Yes.
Okay. And that brings us to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Moviebob Chipman for joining me.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, man. This was a blast. Loved it. Great time. Good questions.
Thank you. And if any of the -7 people listening to this enjoyed it, you can like and subscribe on the YouTubes. And if for some reason, if anyone out there would like to give me a money, you can go to patreon.com/thepumpkincoptercast. You'll know it when you see a vaguely pumpkin-looking thing that seems to have the same outer dimensions as the Doctor's TARDIS. You can go there and give me as big or as small a money as you want, or you could follow me on the Twitters at Tigorman83. And yes, Bob, is there anything you would like to plug before we sign off?
Well, as always, you can check out my work on moviebobcentral.com. Follow me on Twitter at @the_moviebob. Check me out on The Escapist, escapistmagazine.com. I'm the weekly film critic and twice weekly host of The Big Picture. And check me out on YouTube at user Moviebob for new upcoming content.
Okay. And as I've always said at the end of every episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast, have a gourd day.
Thanks, man.